Hi, this is David Healy at Libre, and today I'm going to show you the latest changes I've made to El Mariachi. So the thing I've been working on for the last few weeks is the strumming system for the guitars, and I've essentially rewritten the whole thing. There was a lot about it that was great in the previous version, but there were things that didn't quite work and that I wanted to improve. One of the things I wasn't happy about, this is kind of a technical thing, but the way the system worked before was it automatically kind of calculated all of the different chord positions for the different chords and where they'd appear on the fretboard when you first loaded up the instrument, and then it just kind of had those in the background. So every time you loaded the instrument, it had to do this calculation, and that caused a little bit of instability. I was finding there was the occasional crash. And it also was using a chord dictionary, so it meant if you played some notes that weren't in the dictionary, it didn't know how to deal with them. So I've completely rewritten that part of it, and now it actually does the chord detection on the fly, so it doesn't have to do this beforehand stuff that loads up a chord dictionary. And because it doesn't have a chord dictionary, it's mapping the notes to the fretboard as you play. It means it will work with any notes that you play. And in all my tests so far, it's really accurate with coming up with realistic chord fingerings that you'd actually use on the guitar. So for example, if I play a D chord, so that obviously isn't a very realistic fingering, but if I go to strum it now, so it's taken that D chord that I played and it's mapped it into a realistic fingering for strumming. And this also means it works with inversions. So let's try a different inversion of D. So that's the same. Let's try another one. So there it's come up with a different fingering. So it won't give you a different fingering for every single inversion of every single chord, but a lot of times it will. So that's the first sort of big change I made, was this chord handling. There's been some visual changes as well. The fretboard looks a little different now. And the other change I've made is there's now a polyphonic mode. So that means you can play multiple notes on the same string. So as I'll demonstrate with the top E string there. So previously it was going to restrict you to one note per string, but now it doesn't do that. We can turn that off, and I'll show you how to do that. So if we open the additional settings, scroll all the way down to the end, and we've got this mode button here for polyphonic. We'll just turn that off. So now if I try to play multiple notes on that top E string, it's going to map them to other strings instead. So that's on by default. So out of the box, it's just going to work, and it doesn't matter what you play. It's going to show up on the keys, on the strings, without any issue. It's not going to cut off any notes or anything like that. I've added this button here to show the comfortable playing range based on where you've got the hand position set. So just to give you an idea of what's going to be comfortable for a guitarist. Doesn't do anything functionally, it's just a visual guide. So almost everything else is the same. I've improved the way the velocity speed and velocity length controls work. And there's also now separate controls for length down, length up, and first string down and first string up. So with the first string, you can choose which is going to be the first string of the chord. So let me just turn off the picking sound. So now when I play in the playable range, we don't hear anything, but I can strum, and it's still going to strum. Okay, so the first string down, let me play as a D7th chord. So if I change the first string down, so if I strum down, it's going to, well, we'll see which ones it's playing. So the top string, the 6th string, that's not, that's muted, so that's not going to be played. So the first string it's actually playing is this one. So if I bump this up to 3, so now the first string it's playing is this one. Okay, so that's what the first string does. And for the first string up, it's in the opposite direction, so I'll do an up strum. Okay, and the length down determines how many strings get strummed in a down strum. So by default, it's all the strings that are playable. But we can have that as low as 1. And we can increase that back up. And with the length up, it's the same thing, but for the up strum. Okay, so that's the basics of how they work. Now we have the velocity length. This allows you to use velocity to control what the actual length of the strum is, how many strings are strummed. So these two, length down, length up, then become the maximum limit. So if we double click this and set it to the default of 50%, if I play a low velocity, we can see the velocity that I'm playing over here. So the softer I play, the fewer strings get strummed. And the same with the up strum. By default, this is set to 0, so for just out of the box experience, it's just going to strum all the strings, which is what most people would expect. But you as a power user, you can go in and set that to whatever value you like. I find 50% is a good setting, that's why I've got that as the default. Then we've got strum speed, which is the length of the strum, the duration. So 100 milliseconds is quite good, but we can increase that. I think it goes all the way up to 1 second now. Yeah. I find something more like 250 is probably reasonable. And then we can use velocity speed to control it with velocity. So again, if I play a soft velocity, it's going to have a longer duration. And a higher velocity will have a shorter duration. And I like to have both these settings on and then just sort of combine it. We also can still play the individual strings. So in the previous version of El Mariachi, with the guitars, there were two modes for changing chords. So we had the chord detect mode, which is what I've been using here. And we also had a one key mode. There were some key switches up at the top end here, some green ones, which allowed you to change between like major, minor, sevenths, that kind of thing. That mode has gone now. It was clunky to use. When I was actually using it in a project, it was really difficult to use those key switches and manage them and whatnot. And it's much more natural just to play the chord you want to play. So I've removed that, and it means it's another system I don't have to manage, and it just simplifies the whole thing. So since that part of the keyboard is now free, I've moved the key switches for changing articulations up to that top end, and that means I've got room to expand if I want to have more articulations in the future, because down the bottom end I was starting at C0, and I soon bump into the string keys, so it doesn't give me as much room. So we have more space at the top end, so that's why I'm using them up there. So in addition to the articulations we had in the previous version, we've now also got this sustain with release. So it's exactly the same as the regular sustain articulation, but it's going to give us a muted articulation on release, so we're going to get a release trigger. It would help if I re-enable the picking. There we go. So it's a subtle little effect, but quite nice. Then we've got the regular muted, tremolo, and now we've also got the muted tremolo. So just a little more variety there. So as we saw, to play a chord, you play a triad or an extended chord, and then you use one of the 4 strum keys down at the lower end of the keyboard to actually do the strumming. And that works really nicely, but when I played the chord, when I actually played the triad, we hear those notes. And often you don't want that. So the quick solution, as I demonstrated earlier, was to set the pick direction to be silent, so then you won't get anything in the playable range. But sometimes that's not ideal because you want a mixture of chords and also individual picked notes. So the solution I came up with is this green key switch down the lower end, C0. So if you hold that down and play something in the playable range, you'll get silence, but it will still set the chord. And then, as long as you're not holding that key, you'll get normal picking. So I think that's a good compromise. If I come up with a better system, I'll implement a better system. But I think for now, just having that key switch there makes it really simple to switch between picking and strumming. I think that's all the new features as far as the guitar system's concerned. It's just a lot nicer now. It's a lot more polished and it sounds great. And yeah, I think that's everything with that. So we also did some updates to the viola. And it's the same kind of thing, so the GUI is a bit cleaner. And we've got all the same settings we have for the guitar, so the polyphonic mode, the comfort range, that kind of thing. And the green key switch down here. I'm not sure, do we have... Yeah, so we've got a few more articulations here, so this is the main reason I needed to move the key switches up to the top end, was to allow for these extra articulations on the viola. So that's it for the guitars. The other thing I've been working on is the attacks of the trumpets and the violins, because they needed a little bit of work. And I'm always tweaking things, and I think there's a thing that all creatives do, which is you want perfection, and that kind of holds you back. So I'm always trying to improve things, but maybe I should just put it out there and then improve things in an update. And I mean, I will be improving things in updates anyway. So it's just getting to a point where I'm happy enough to release it. But I'm quite happy with the way the attacks sound now. So in the previous versions, and this goes for my other libraries as well, like Bell and Bone and the flutes, the HDSR envelope, the attack of the envelope controlled the, just set the maximum value, but the actual attack was controlled by velocity. That's no longer the case. It's now just a standard envelope. So if I just turn that up, you're just going to get a slow attack, no matter what velocity you play. However, playing a lower velocity will still generate a softer attack, but it won't affect the actual attack time of the envelope. It's just giving a different attack, almost like it's playing a different attack sample. And playing a harder velocity will give a harder attack with a bit of an accent. So a lot of work on the attack, some work on the legato transitions, and as I say, it's just a constant process of tweaking and adjusting things, but I'm very, very close to being happy now with how that's sounding. So that was for the trumpets. I did pretty much the same process for the violins to improve the attacks. Not exactly a traditional Mariachi tune, but just something to demonstrate those attacks. I'm particularly pleased with the attacks on the violin and how they've come together. It's sounding really good. There are a few more tweaks I want to make to the violin. This rebo tremolo articulation, which has a tremolo crossfade. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to keep that. I don't know how happy I am with that. I might just split them into two articulations instead. Something else I've also added, I've just remembered, to the trumpet and the violin is a sustain articulation. So we've got the performance articulation, which adapts to how you play. And you can play chords with this. Now we've got a sustain articulation, which is just the sustain notes. There's no performance interpretation. There's no legato with this. I added this sustain articulation because certain things I was trying to play were kind of being interfered with by the performance articulation because of that legato scripting. So it was thinking I was wanting to play legato and I was actually wanting to play chords. And one thing in particular I was trying to do was to emulate a double stop. So that's where the violinist will play sort of across two strings, play two notes at the same time, or even triple stops and things. So when I was trying to do that on the performance articulation, I was getting this, and it's just, it can be done, but it's kind of tricky. So the sustain articulation just makes that a bit easier. So I've put it in there for that reason. I've also added a sustain articulation to the trumpet. I should have mentioned that. So that's there as well. Same thing. Okay, that's where we're at with El Mariachi. As you can see, it's pretty much finished. There's a few little tweaks I want to make, but all the pieces are there. I plan to make the announcement about the release next week. I plan to, but I'm not promising it, but that's my aim so far. So keep an eye out for the announcement video. If you've got any questions or comments, you can leave them below this video. And if you're not subscribed to the El Mariachi mailing list, I'll leave a link to that as well. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this little video, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.